Have you ever tried to pull yourself together and push your way through or force your way through circumstance or challenges? Or maybe rather the question should be, how often do you do that? Because I think it's a capacity that we all have to do that sometimes. But the thing is that if that's the place where you live your life from, if you pull yourself together and tighten up and force power through everything most of the time, it's going to drain your energy and your fulfillment, frankly. And I'm going to talk to you about why this is. But first of all, I really want to acknowledge that you're struggling and fighting and powering your way through things that are challenging or difficult. And I completely acknowledge the fact that sometimes it is the only way to go. I'm not some kind of happy-go-lucky guy that, oh, we can always just, it's all roses and stuff. Sometimes life is tough. Sometimes circumstances are challenging. You may be a single parent with 3 kids and you've got no choice but to make ends meet. And so what do? You power up and you tighten up and you do whatever has to be done. And I really acknowledge the fact that that is part of life sometimes. But I still want to challenge if it has to be that way as much as it may be in your life. So that's really what I'm talking about, because the thing is, when you pull yourself together, literally that happens in the body. Your muscles tense up, the nervous system goes into the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, which is like the fight response in the body. So it creates enormous stress. And that's not a wrong thing per se, but it's not a good thing to do over and over and over again. And so on top of creating that stress, what also happens is that if we look at like the Chinese medicine, we have the 5 elements where this idea of pulling together and powering through and neglecting maybe your own needs will diminish the flow of energy to what is called the water element, which is where the life flow resides, the flow that you can sort of lean back and things will happen for the greater good, the faith that things are going to work out. It's also connected to your life force. And I know that these softer ways of looking at life, if you're used to really pulling yourself together, those are not really the ones that you practice the most. And you may even look at it and go, but you can't live like that. What's that kind of, they don't take responsibility. And I'm not saying you should let go of everything. I'm just telling you that pulling together along with the tension and maybe the pain in the jaws and the back or your abdomen, along with that also goes that the life force inside of your body is being diminished. So it's important for a lot of things. And it's also important because, frankly, it's not necessarily leading you to the happy and joyful life, feeling free like the person you could be. And all of this is said totally acknowledging the fact that maybe life is throwing stuff at you that needs to be taken care of and you don't have a choice right now. I'm just trying to rock the boat a little bit. So why does this happen at all? Why do people tighten up and force their way through stuff? Well, there are several reasons, and I'm going to talk about a few of them. One of them is simply circumstance. Stuff happens, people around you get sick, maybe your parents, maybe your kids are suffering, maybe you're going through a divorce and there's nothing for you to do but to just pull it all together and make ends meet, whatever the cost. And I get that. Circumstance does that to us. Nothing wrong with that, right? The second thing that may happen here is that it's conditioning through life. Let's say that we look back at childhood where maybe you grew up in an environment where you weren't supported. Maybe the people that were supposed to take care of you didn't take care of you because they were unable or unfit or whatever. And so who was left to take care of you? Only you were. And if we learn that at an early age, we don't have that many options. We can become weak and sort of let go and give up, or we can tighten up and power our way through. And you're listening to this, I'm pretty certain which of those choices you made. But it's important to recognize that this may be a conditioning from way back. It may also be that it wasn't from your childhood, but that you became a parent early in life and you had to make everything work with jobs and studies and kids and a developing relationship, or maybe no relationship, or whatever the case may be. And so what did you do? You did what had to be done. You did what was necessary. You did what it took to make things work. And now you may be at a later stage in life where really you don't necessarily need to keep that behavior, but it's been conditioned into you. So no matter what happens, your instinct gut reaction will be pulling together, tightening up, powering through things. And if that's the case, I really want to challenge you a little bit and invite you to look at the possibility of going through life in a different manner, in a manner that's a little bit more easygoing, where you don't have to strain yourself that much. Because if this is the case for you, I know that you're feeling the strain. I know that you can sense it's taking its toll. Maybe you're looking older in your face. Maybe you don't have the energy. Maybe you feel that emotionally you're struggling a bit. And people, they go, yeah, well, but I'm also getting old, and it's age and it's stuff, and maybe you're 45 or 50 or around that. And trust me, those things are not caused by age. Of course, as we strain our resources over time, we'll get tired or exhausted, but it's more the way you and I, other people behave, and the way we treat our energy that diminishes it than it's the actual age. Because listen, you can be 50, 60, 70 and lots of energy. It's not the age. It's just that over the years, when we treat ourselves in an imbalanced way, it drains the life force, right? So we get those things confused. That was just an important point to make, right? So those are two of the most foundational reasons why this happened. And there is also one, which is that it's just become habit, right? You've been doing this stuff for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever. And it's just been ingrained into your nervous system that, hey, whenever something happens, you just tighten up and you go through it, right? And habit is a strong thing, and it's real. And it comes sort of from the conditioning. But when I was talking about the conditioning, it's more like if traumatic events have happened or really stressful periods, and it doesn't necessarily need to come from that. It can also just come from habit, that something had to be taken care of and you found that this strategy worked, and you did it again and you found that it worked, and you did it again and you found that it worked, and you did it at work and you did it at home and you did it all kinds of places and you found that it worked. And so you're stuck with it because that's what we do, us humans, right? So those are three of the most common, like, overall reasons why this pulling ourselves together and powering, forcing, pushing through things occur. And so now to the magic question, what do you do with it? Well, first of all, you question the habit. You take the audacity to actually question your habit and say, hey, could this be different? Might there be another way? And I know that when we have beliefs, when we have these deeply ingrained habits of behavior and emotion and thought, we tend to think that they're the only way. And I want to just point out that this idea of having to pull your power together and push through things is one of the, you will meet resistance, right, inside of you. When you question it, there will oftentimes be an inner voice that goes, no, there is no other way. This is the only way. This is the only way I can survive and be as I'm supposed to be, right? So be prepared for that resistance, right? But start by questioning it. when you feel yourself going into that, oh, I gotta take care of this, question it. Just take a second. You know, this thing that needs to be taken care of, you can leave it there for 30 minutes or an hour or maybe even a couple of days and then come back to it. And what happens in that pause period is that it loses some of the intensity, right? Do you know this? Have you ever tried this, that something turns up and you're like, oh, we gotta handle this, and it's so important and it's so intense and it's got so much charge, and then something else happens that diverges your attention, and then a couple of days later you come back to this thing and you're like, oh, but it was just this small thing, it wasn't that important really, right? And when life does that to us, it's sort of funny, but do it on purpose, right? Do it intentionally. When things pop up, and I get it, some things need to be taken care of right now. Your kid calls, something's wrong, you gotta act and take care of it and handle it. I totally get it, right? I'm not this kind of dreamer who just thinks that, oh, it's all unicorns and stuff, because it isn't. Some things needs to be taken care of. But those that aren't really important right now, allow yourself to question your habitual behavior. Could you do something differently, right? So that's one thing you can do. The next thing is related to the conditioning I was talking about. Acknowledge the depth that this belief has in you, right? So often people, they'll tell maybe you or others, I hear this all the time, that, oh, but you should just think this, or you could just, or just let it be, or just whatever. But the thing is that when circumstances or events trigger something in your nervous system, my nervous system, it's not just anything, it's reality within. It's so intense, and it's the real thing you feel at that point. But the reality is also that what you feel is determined by the deeper beliefs, right? So acknowledge the depth, that this is not just some superficial thing that you can just, change like that. It's like, yeah, you brush your teeth, and then when you're done, you start the habit of flossing your teeth as well. Or when you have, all this about habit management, that you attach a new small thing. So when you've brushed your teeth, you eat your vitamin pill, right? Those things are sort of easy to implement, or they can be difficult, as small as they are, right? But acknowledge the depth of these beliefs. And the reason why it's important, because I don't want you to make yourself wrong for feeling this. I don't want you to make your behavior or the habit or the beliefs wrong, because it has supported you. It may even have saved your life emotionally, maybe even literally. So acknowledge that this is not just a small thing. It's a huge thing, right? But still, as the first point was, question it. And the final thing I want to talk about, how you can handle this, is physically release the tension. You remember I started by talking about how pulling yourself together creates tension in the body, right? So what you do there is that you really pay attention to that tension. And so take a second, close your eyes, breathe, release that breath, right? You know the feeling when you go to bed and you lay your head down on the pillow and you're relaxed, and you take like a couple of deep breaths, and all of a sudden, you relax more. You're like, you couldn't even feel that there was tension there, right? But that's what the breath does. It works for the muscles, it works for the nervous system. And what it also does is that, you remember I was talking about the Chinese medicine, the model with the 5 elements. This behavior belongs in what is called metal, and there are 2 physical organs included in that energy sphere, and those are the larger intestine and the lungs. So when you breathe deeply and release, you actually stimulate that metal element, which means that you bring energy to it so that it can release the tension. I don't know if that's totally clear, but what you need to know is that, of course, breathing influences the lungs and the nervous system and the muscles, but it also energetically helps the body release the wanting to go into that tight spot, right? So play around with this. First of all, acknowledge yourself that you have taken on this challenge. Acknowledge that your life has conditioned you to get tough or hard or strong and to be able to make things work. It's a beautiful capacity. It just can't run your life, because then it's going to run you down, right? And you know, when I'm talking about all this, it's so easy for me to stand here and talk about. And I just want to acknowledge that it takes a bit of courage, because you're questioning something that is really important inside of you. So it takes courage to do something differently. It's ingrained in your nervous system in most instances, so you will meet resistance, and it's pretty much an identity piece. It's become part of who you are. It's a way of getting a feeling of control over things. You and I both know intellectually that when things are happening out here, you can't control them. We can't control them necessarily. But going into that strong, tight space gives us a sense of control. But it's an illusion, because it's not a control of what's happening out here, because we can't control it. But it gives us a sense of control in here, because being flow and loose and all that, instead of tightening up here, we feel like we're in control of something. And you're in control of all your muscles. They're tight, right? But you diminish the flow of energy and life force, right? So all of those things, take them into account. Treat yourself lightly. Don't judge yourself for this, but take it on as a fun challenge. Look at yourself. Give this person who tightens up a name. Call it Carl. And then you'll go, hey, Carl, are you there? Whatever you want to call it. Maybe a female name. You decide that. Whatever suits you. But see it as part of you that has done a lot of good for you, but it cannot run your life any longer. Because what all this is about, all the work I'm doing, is really about helping you finding a way where there is more light, where there's more joy, where there's more freedom, where there's more the true you, who doesn't need to power through everything, who doesn't need to tense up, right? And if you want to learn more about this, go to my website, jacobbogi.com, sign up for my newsletter, and allow me to send you free gifts and special offers and information and inspiration. I'd love to see you there and to be able to share all these things with you. For now, I want to end this rant, and I wish you a magnificent day. Go out and live it lightly. Look at this part of you that tightens up and tenses up and thinks it needs to force its way through everything. Loosen up a bit. Let it sit over there. Try to explore and navigate in how are other possibilities possible. So go out and enjoy.